Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on Business Incorporated. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago. On today's program, West African leaders pledge $1 billion to fight Islamist threat. 11 billion green energy initiative takes shape in South Africa. Plus, Ghana power producers say plan to save costs carries hefty bill. Let's get the show started now with the markets, and the Nigerian stock market looks set to kick off the week on a positive note, with the all-share index up 0.49% at intraday, thanks to a 2.18% increase on the banking sector index as at midday. The South African bourse was also looking good at intraday with a 0.66% gain. It was a different story in Egypt, where the index was 0.73% lower at intraday, while the Kenyan stock market ended Friday's session down 0.21%. And in the Middle East, most of the markets were in the green as at intraday, except Saudi Arabia. Top oil producer Saudi Aramco has assured some of its clients that there will be no shortage in supplies after the attacks on its facilities. Saudi Arabia was 0.06% in the south at intraday. Abu Dhabi index was up 1.71%. In Dubai, the index was also 0.29% positive. Qatar's index was also up 1.12% at intraday. And European markets traded lower in the morning as investors digested an escalation of tensions in the Middle East following an attack on Saudi oil production. For these and more, let's talk to Ashutosh Pandey from the trading floor of the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. Hello, Ashutosh. Good afternoon and a beautiful week to you.
Thanks, Jimmy. It's always great to be back on Channels TV.
Great. Well, this attack on Saudi Arabian oil facilities must have left investors worried.
Yeah, certainly. Yes, you can make out from the DAX behind me how it's crawling in the negative territory. There is definitely a lot of concern, not so much about what it means for oil supplies, but more about what it means for the geopolitics. And they are concerned about how the geopolitical situation in the region is going to pan out going forward. There is no certainty on how the Saudis are going to react to these attacks, and also for that matter how the US is going to react to these attacks. And we've already seen warnings fly from all sides, and most importantly coming from Donald Trump, President of the United States, when he says that they are already they're warning with things like loaded and all sorts of saying about how Iran is responsible without even verifying as to who is the actual player, who is the actual culprit. The Houthi rebels have claimed responsibility for this, but there are doubts as to whether they could actually manage to carry out such an attack. But at this point of time, the markets are really spooked.
So what does this mean for OPEC Plus deal to limit production to control prices? Can we expect a rethink?
Not at this point of time, not in the short term at least. The OPEC Plus countries, including Russia and Saudi, have maintained that there is enough inventories to take care of the shortfall and to bridge that gap. But there are definitely concerns that some of the OPEC members may be tempted to make money out of the growing prices of oil at this point of time. There have been many members who've been reluctant to be part of the deal in the first place, and this might be an opportunity for them to actually make some money with the prices going up, and that also includes Russia. But at this point of time, Russia has said that there is no need to actually increase production. Perhaps it's also mindful of the fact that how the demand is for oil at this point of time. In a slowing economy, demand has actually taken a beating, and it does not look like it's going to improve anytime soon, with 2020 is also projected to be like a weak year for oil demand. And that's precisely, I feel that's the reason why they're sticking to the current production targets. Otherwise, what if they increase production and eventually the supply, the production from the Saudi facility comes online, and that's when the prices are going to be further hit. And that's the reason why I feel at this point of time, OPEC Plus countries are maintaining that they're not going to increase production. And there is no need to do that for now.
Anyway, in other news, world's oldest bank, Italian Monte dei Paschi, well, this is tongue twisting. Well, this bank is considering a bad bank rescue approach as a final option to prevent its collapse. Is this laundry bank a likely silver bullet for this lender? What is the news on this out of Italy today?
Well, this is what is being reported in the Italian media, that this bank is actually considering creating a bad bank of all its non-performing loans. And remember, this bank is actually owned majority by the government. The government had bailed out this bank in the 2017, and it still owns 70%. But then that takeover was never supposed to be a permanent deal. And at some point, the Italian government plans to come out of it. And now this report says that perhaps it is seriously considering selling its stake in the bank, and creating a bad bank of all the non-performing loans is just part of it. Like, you create a bad bank with all your non-performing loans, and then the good bank can be a more attractive target for potential buyers. At this point of time, there is no clarity on what kind of interest is there for this bank. But yes, there are some sort of assertions that perhaps it could be some medium-sized bank in Italy that could eventually buy that stake in this bank.
All right, Ashutosh, well, the week has just started, so let's look forward to a great week. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day. Meanwhile, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is expected to tell European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker that the UK is not prepared to postpone Brexit beyond the current 31st of October deadline at a meeting in Luxembourg today. Well, let's see how that talk is going, as well as other stories on the radar. Juliana Olanka joins us now. Hello, Juliana. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chimeze.
Right, the FTSE 100 was down in early trading, even though the shares in oil companies, BP and Shell, were up more than 3%. How are the markets holding up at the moment after that attacks on Saudi facilities?
Well, Chime, the global markets are scrambling, and of course, London isn't immune from this. Reuters news agency are actually quoting sources saying that Saudi Aramco is saying it could take months for this production to be fully up and running again. Of course, 5% of global production has been halted, and that's that 5.1 million barrels, which was eliminated over this weekend. So it's pretty serious, and there are sources close to what's going on saying that the anxiety could increase later this week. But let's have a closer look at those numbers, shall we? At intraday, the FTSE All Share is down 0.31%. The FTSE 100 is also down 0.22%, and the FTSE 250 is down 0.70%. Currency is also terrible. The British pound is down on the US dollar by 0.46%, down on the euro by 0.16%, and down on the Japanese yen by 0.75%.
Okay, let's look at some of the corporates. Aside from Aldi, which other corporate news is grabbing the headlines today?
Well, there's a pretty interesting story that seems to be growing as time goes on, and that's involving Petra Diamonds. Now, Petra Diamonds are a London-based dining group. They've got mines in South Africa and Tanzania. They had a pretty awful year last year, and it seems to be as if, this is continuing. They've reported losses, a net loss of 22%, so they're down after tax $258 million. And it's particularly worrying. And their CEO has been speaking, saying that the diamond industry is just very bad at the moment. Some of the reasons that he cited in the statement that he released earlier today is what's going on in Hong Kong. Those Sino-US tariff wars and the Hong Kong protests are really denting their customer anxiety. They're just not spending as much as they used to. And of course, Asia are the world's biggest market for diamonds. So Petra have said this. And again, they had a terrible year last year. It's continuing, and they say it could get worse. So as soon as they made that statement, their shares were down 8% today.
Okay, let's look at the Brexit talks there. Boris Johnson is meeting European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker today. How do you think that meeting will go, and what is your outlook for the week?
Well, who knows? You know, it's Brexit. Every day there's another spin and another tale. This morning, yes, he did meet the EU President Jean-Claude Juncker. This is the first time, actually, that two have met face to face since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister a couple of months ago. The EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, was also present, as well as some other really senior figures within Downing Street. On the way in, you know, it looked very chummy. There were lots of smiles, although Boris Johnson did say on camera that he's being extremely cautious. Their 2-hour working lunch wrapped up without giving anything away to the press. So at the moment, we don't know. We are expecting a statement to be released much later on in the day by Jean-Claude Juncker, if we're going along with the reports that Michel Barnier had said. At the moment, Boris Johnson is currently in a meeting with his Luxembourg counterpart, Xavier Bettel. So really, we're just waiting and seeing. Boris Johnson is determined, at least he says he's determined, to get a deal by the EU Council meeting, which is on 2 days between the 17th and the 18th of October. And of course, we know the pressing issue is the Northern Ireland backstop. If he's successful, that means he's managed to convince his DUP members who make up the government. They're a Northern Ireland Democratic Unionist party. And of course, they have to impress Ireland. But as the clock is ticking on, we're realising that now the scuffling in Parliament and in London has settled down. His biggest battle is going to be with the EU.
Well, we'll continue to keep a tab on that and other developing story. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, Chime.
And stocks in Asia were mixed today as oil prices surged following drone attacks over the weekend that hit major oil production facilities in Saudi Arabia. The Shanghai Composite was little changed at around 3,030 points, while the Shenzhen Composite was just below the flat line. The Shenzhen Composite added 0.23% to approximately 1,685 points. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index shed about 1% as of its final hour of trading. Australia's S&P ASX 200 closed fractionally higher at 6,673 points. And, of course, markets in Japan were closed on Monday for a holiday. And U.S. stock futures were lower this morning amid fears that a surge in oil prices following an attack in Saudi Arabia could slow down global economic growth. As at 1:20 a.m. Eastern Time, the Dow Jones Industrial Average futures were down 146 points, implying a loss of more than 150 points at Monday's open. S&P 500 and Nasdaq 100 futures were also down. That would be the first decline in 9 days for the Dow, which had climbed back to within 1% from a record on Friday. President Donald Trump tweeted on Sunday before the futures opened that the U.S. could use oil from its strategic petroleum reserve to keep the market well supplied. There are no major corporate earnings nor data releases to note. All right, we'll take a break, and when we come back, West African leaders pledge $1 billion to combat terrorism. Just stay with us.